Hello and welcome to this very special live episode of Leadership of Fools. We're coming you straight from the nicest segment of the Entertainment Cube here at the Melbourne Exhibition Centre, MKEC. And I'm joined by a panel of leaders and experts. I'm the fool, so I've got that covered. You guys don't have to worry about the fool part. To my left, we've got Alice Sidhu.
So am I the leader or the expert after that? I'm
You're
not sure.
You're a little bit of both. You know, you cover a lot of bases. That's what I've always liked about you, Alice.
Fool. I should have given
No,
that option.
that's
as
all
well.
me.
Glad to hear it.
Thanks for coming along. And we've got Todd Lichti. Did I get your name right?
You did get the name right.
Because that's my number one KPI that I'm trying to hit today.
People have known me for years and not get the name right, so well done.
And right in the middle here, we've got Temby.
Good to be back.
Now, I should give you a little context. You're a basketball superstar. I don't use that term lightly, but I'm using it now. Am I correct? You don't have to big up yourself. But
days gone by, 30 years ago maybe. I was drafted 15th in the '89 draft, NBA draft. So if that's classified as superstardom, then I'll take it.
I believe it is. Yeah,
We'll
absolutely. Kate Temby, you've got a resume as long as. Think of like a Christmas list to Santa. It's longer than that. You've been on Australian Survivor back in the day, and you've moved on. That's in the past, and now you're here at MKEC.
In a circular room.
Yeah.
So we'll get used to it. But thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. And on the end, another basketballing megastar. That's right. I'm going megastar. It's Chris Carroll.
Rick, thank you. It feels a little bit Johnny Farnham in the round. You know that, you come up and talk and you feel like you've got to rotate and turn to everyone. It kind of feels like that.
I feel like you might be ready to burst into song there after that.
Well, I didn't want to. I've probably given the surprise away a bit early, everyone. So just give me your requests.
He did retire last
Boys,
year, but he's back.
Backstreet Boys is a sweet spot of mine. So, yeah.
And we are going to have just a brief, informal yet insightful conversation about leadership today. So we're going to tackle some leadership issues, drawing on your insights, your wisdom, your knowledge, maybe force you to shoot some hoops at some stage just for my own entertainment, especially you, Kate. I want to see you go from downtown. Alice, you got a question for these superstars?
I do. Given where we are and the focus of...
At MKEC.
I'm not even going to try and pronounce
It's my new favourite word.
But we're here with MYOB at the Partner Connect
MYOB at
event.
MKEC.
I'm going to leave you try and make those sounds. We're really here to talk about success. And we've got a pretty, as you said, Rick, all-star panel, so I'm kind of feeling, one, a bit short, but two, also, a little bit of a degree of edging superstardom here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about success and see where the conversation takes us. So I might start with you, Chris. I'm not sure if that's an entry way into you broaching out into song, but success, it's personal. So what does success actually mean and look like to you?
Well, I think you touched on it. Success is a funny word because it's displayed very explicitly, and people make assessment of success based on often what they see and what material things that hang off an individual. Whereas, I think a deeper thought about success is often about the internal definition of things that what I might do broader than material that represent progress. So success is, I think, obviously determined individually, but the trap with success is having it, under one single dimension. And a lot of people, and success is very obvious, and obviously failure is also obvious. But, what I'd like to get to in this conversation is sort of like a repointing of people's understanding of what success is, more into the drivers or the things upstream to outcomes of whereas, success lives in a range of places. We just don't often call those out or recognise them as often as we do the big showy stuff.
It's easy to get caught up in the things that are, as you said, obvious. Kate, from your perspective, you've had a pretty diverse career, lots of different experience. Probably not, we didn't use super or mega in front of what you've done, but that doesn't diminish it, which is, to Chris's point, in fact, it's just different. Does that change your perspective of what success looks like or means to you?
I actually think the interesting thing about success is when you are younger, it feels like it's achieving the outcome, it's shooting the goal or whatever that outcome is, and often it is publicly recognised. But I think over time, your definition of success is deeper, and it's really, to Chris's comment, that it's how do you feel within yourself, and in fact the outcome, and that may not be, it may look successful on the outside, but actually what is it that you've achieved internally? From that, if you have achieved great success professionally or personally, how you have defined it, not how the external market has defined it, you will be a stronger and happier person.
Just got to start gauging your internal success metrics, don't you? That's what we're all trying to do. Oh, I've thought of the phrase for you now. You're a corporate colossus. There you go.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Colossus.
I like that.
Corporate
I
colossus.
knew you were thinking about something and not success.
Yeah, I haven't listened to a word you've said. I've been thinking, what's the right phrase for Kate Tenby?
I like the alliteration there too. Corporate colossus Kate.
One of my favourite
Thanks. So it's taking that time to break it down and that personal reflection about what it means. And it's different for a lot of people.
So Todd, your career has been very public in terms of the NBA component of it, at least. Has your view of success changed from when you were playing versus where you are now? And if so, how?
Yeah, it certainly has. I remember back my second or third year of university in the U.S. at Stanford in the Bay Area, and Kevin Johnson, who became a Hall of Fame NBA player. I think he's a Hall of Fame player by now. A very good player, played at Cal, and he was the 7th pick, drafted sort of 2 years before me. And when I remember him signing, and he signed for $500,000 a year back in '87, and I said, that's my goal next. So I'm going to shoot for that, right? And I think, and ironically, I was the 15th pick, and I got the same sort of money. So I signed a 5-year contract, and it got me off to a nice start in life. I guess the problem is you think it's going to last forever. And I think professional sport, especially when you're looking at sort of AFL level now, which financially is probably worse. You know, the pay isn't as great as it was when I started in the NBA in '89 still. So I think the trap is that these players think they're living the dream, making in a lower level $200,000 or $300,000 a year, which isn't bad at all. Half of it goes to taxes. They wake up one day, 30 or 35 years old, and
spent.
Their mates.
So old.
Well, their mates that have started in a real estate agency out of high school, from the bottom, are now running the place and killing it, and they haven't thought about the next 50 years of their life.
Got to get into the sport of real estate. That's where the money is.
I think, unfortunately, media, most people equate success with financial success, and it's much broader than that. The days I feel good about going home from work are the days I feel productive, and productive in the sense of getting out, meeting people, making a sales call, genuinely believing in the products I'm selling, and genuinely believing that I'm helping people I'm selling to, even though we're making money doing it. And the days I don't feel so great is when I'm sitting in the office doing paperwork, which is progress, but I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. So unfortunately, I think there's a lot more to success than just financial success, but that's what everyone needs to focus on. I know if I'm letting my son down, I don't feel very good about myself.
There's a lot of conversation around things like purpose and value creation and value delivery as individuals, things that drive us that you've just touched on, Todd. It seems all of you are talking about a perspective that is that success is more than financially driven, which we kind of all get to. So I'm just interested from any one of you, Kate, maybe you can start next again. Picking up that point, at what point in your career or life do you actually start making that transition away from the view that success is financial? And is there a trigger, or is it just an evolution?
For me, and having a career that spanned both in Australia and then working in Toronto and then working in New York for many years and coming back, you are sort of focused on the next thing. So there isn't that too much time of reflection because it's the next goal. I actually think it's having children for me as a woman, because you have to make the choice to leave work. And then also all of a sudden that wheel that you're on, you're actually stepping right off it. So I think that was for me the grounding time to think, actually, what values do I want to live by and what's important to me? And from that moment is when I started working, not full-time, flexibly, and really focused on the input and believing, a bit like you pointed out on the MBA, where you were going to list, the outcome would come. but I had no model for that outcome because there was no other women around. But I just believed if I lived by my values, and that is actually my children and being there for them, as well as input from the work perspective, the outcome would come. So I think that for me, that was a transition.
It's got switching from pursuing success to having to model success for someone else makes you evaluate what success means to you. Kids will do that to you every time.
A shift of priorities as well in terms of things that are important. Did you have a similar epiphany?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking
moment?
to my wife Simone this morning about this, and she made this point around the phases of accumulation followed by the consolidation. And the accumulation part is that you know, either out of high school into university or college and trying to climb the corporate ladder or whatever field you've chosen, and that's when you're really chasing the success, and you really look for those very obvious waypoints. What does my first car look like? Do I have enough deposit for a house? Where do we go on holidays? And we sort of have this success attribution in this accumulation phase, and then it's a bit like Kate is saying, you get to a stage in your career and your life where it's more about consolidation, and then I think that's the point at which a deeper understanding of success starts to present itself. And so, and then you figure out that was good then, but I'm now at a phase of life and career that says I probably just need to go a little bit deeper and back to purpose and values and family, raising kids, making sure that they have the success that you hope for. It's just a reorientation, and it's a little bit to do with phase of life, phase of career.
You have to deep dive for success instead of snorkeling in a shallow pool of success. You've got to go right down to the bottom.
A shallow pool in Mykonos.
I think I was going to say it depends where you're where you're snorkeling.
That's true. I've been snorkeling in all the wrong places.
You have to. I think you need to get to the Greek islands pronto.
You guys with your secret snorkeling spots, always rubbing my face in it.
Which actually leads me to a comment. I'm going to throw this out and discuss. Do you have the luxury of reflecting on, I guess, a higher perception or a more intense value around what success looks like when you've actually been successful in the accumulation phase? So is it something that you can do when you have, at a baseline achieved sort of some foundational?
Can you only reassess success once you've achieved a certain level of it?
Yeah.
Does that allow you the freedom to reassess?
I think
Todd, go for it.
which is why we're here. The success is different for everyone, and Rupert Murdoch would look at me and think I'm probably not very successful.
He said that to me. He said that to me the other day.
And
he said, "Todd Lichti, don't even start."
I won't even take his phone call. So I think it's all relative for everyone. But I was asked, going back to my college days again, I was asked by a reporter. I was a pretty good basketball player, obviously, and so after games, reporters covering our team would ask questions, and they said, "Well, what are your goals going forward?" And I simply said, "I want to be happy." And to me, that's what success is. Now, what makes everybody happy is different. So I found out that making a certain amount of money, as I already discussed, signing a 5-year deal, it was, I don't know, $3.5 million back in '89, quite a bit of money. But I found out pretty quickly that's not what made me happy. So did I enjoy having that kind of money coming in to my bank account every month or whatever? Yep. Absolutely, but it wasn't what delivered happiness to me. So I reached that goal and then quickly realized that there's got to be other things in your life. And I think I make less now doing what we're doing as a wine distributor. Our business makes more than that, but I find it more rewarding in the sense that I'm actually challenged. The basketball thing was something, in a sense, I worked hard for, but I was born with. The wine distribution business that we bought almost 20 years ago started from scratch, and it was really a personal challenge. Can we make this work?
Have you at least worked some basketball puns into the wine, like the slam dunk Shiraz?
You know what, ironically, nobody cares that I played basketball when you're trying to sell a bottle.
Don't you say that.
All they care about is, are you going to be able to help my business?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if we can't do that, we go out of business pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But if you can honestly say, I can, this is going to be a good product, you're going to get good feedback if you put this on your wine list. And if you can honestly say that, you feel pretty good about yourself.
It seems like it takes a lot of courage to actually almost put a pause on that trajectory of financial success, to either have children or change a career for both you, Chris and Todd. So what's your, what are some of the things I think that helped you actually make that decision, and what are some of the investments, non-financial or even financial, that you have to make in yourself?
We want stock
to
tips
actually
is
achieve
basically what we're
that.
asking. Any advice is really useful.
Yeah, success for dummies in 5 steps.
Just to pick up that point of how do you find the time, I do think often you have to pause and step off something. So I was with Goldman Sachs for 20 years and I left with nothing to follow. And it seemed so easy to do that at the time, but in hindsight, and I'm still wondering
how?
Actually,
that's why I use the word courage.
Yeah, and it was going into the next space of which you're not actually sure what it's about. So having that time and then spending time really thinking about it, actually writing this stuff down, because typically once you reiterate it, once you start talking about it with people, there's something that clearly happens in your mind. And you work out, well, what does actually happiness mean? You need to break that down further. And the reason why you do it, not so you've got some amazing tombstone that sits there and says, okay, this is my legacy or whatever, my shining light. It actually really allows you to just focus on what it is, and then you can focus on the inputs for that. And I actually haven't worked it out yet. I'm on that sort of 2-year sort of transition, I think.
It definitely sounds like you're advocating a dream journal, and I'm 100% on board.
Yeah,
you heard it here first.
Nicely.
That's the number one takeaway from today. Start a dream journal, and you'll see success roll in.
Or an intention board.
One or the other.
But
One or
it's
the other.
more, think putting the time in your mind and the conversations, because once you actually start thinking about that, you'll start talking about it with people, and it actually encourages people to come to you in the energy of that rather than being defined by what you were. And I think your example is great. No one cares about that you play basketball, right?
Yeah.
Not when I'm selling wine.
Yeah, when you're at the basketball match. So I think it does help you replant yourself and ground yourself, because in that next iteration you'll have a whole lot of more failures, right? And so you won't have anything that you had in the past to support you. So you sort of need that as your foundation.
It's a reinvention, it really, isn't it? So I want to talk to Todd and Chris about it in a different way. So Todd, let's go to the wine. Let's go to the wine first. What do you think, Rick?
Wine rack on tour, Todd Lichti, who may or may not have played basketball in the past. We're not sure, and no one cares.
But we all know that there's no slam dunk Shiraz, so that's the main thing.
Yet.
So did you
Don't rule it out.
Did you have a plan for leaving the basketball career behind and deliberately going with the wine business, or did you stop and then take some time, as Kate talked about, and then arrived at that?
I mean, really the big decision for my wife and I was, after basketball, I did 3 years of commentary with Fox Sports for the Denver Nuggets, traveled the country and did the television color commentary. I think they call it special comments here.
Hence the Rupert Murdoch comment. That makes sense now.
Okay, I'll take
Is
that.
there bad blood? There's bad blood. There's a real rift.
Yeah, that's right. And we just made a decision back in 2000 when we got married, we were talking about starting a family, that Australia was a better place to raise a family. We really had nothing professionally to come to. We wanted to be in Melbourne. Long story short, we saw this wine business for sale, and it's been tough. You know, it's been tough. There was one employee when we bought it, one full-time employee, and that was me. So now we're up to about 10, and we're small to medium-sized, and we do very well for ourselves, and we're well respected in the industry. But at some point, you know, and it's been a lot of long days, long hours, come home. At some point, I think the question you need to ask yourself, or at least I ask myself, is how much is enough? You know, how big do I want to get?
I think wine is 2.5 standard drinks is enough, I think. That's by law.
If you're going through customs, it's a little bit different.
One of the favorite sayings, I don't know where I saw this 10 or 20 years ago, and I quote it to my wife and son probably 3 or 4 times a year, is happiness isn't having what you want, but wanting what you have. And I think too often we focus on the things other people have or what we don't have or what we want, but when does that end? You know, want this, I get that, and then there's something else I want. So when do we actually focus on what we have in the workplace, what our lives are, our family, and those sort of things? When do we emphasize that? I think people tend to emphasize what they don't have more than what they have.
It's the whole idea of keeping up with the Joneses, isn't it? And sometimes we define success in that way as well.
Which is quite prevalent in the US, and you know, it happens everywhere.
Everywhere, I think. So Chris, you're not into wine, but you're running a very successful business. which you can both plug if you want to.
No, I wouldn't do that.
So
That crass.
I wanted to, but you're actually doing something that's quite different from playing basketball. So did you have a view, and how has that view changed given what you're doing now?
Yeah, so my time in the National Basketball League was a little bit different to the National Basketball Association. So, and I think the obvious difference is Todd spoke about multi-million dollar multi-year contracts. I had the similarity is that we both had a multi-year contract. Let's just say that.
You both played a ball with a game. No, a game with a ball.
We both actually played for the same club. When I played Perth Wildcats, and when Todd left the NBA, he came out and played. So we actually played in the same club. We didn't play together. Back to your question, did I think when I was playing basketball that my dream was to be the CEO of an audiology business? Probably not. I think when I reflect on the thing that I'm most pleased about was whilst I was playing was continuing to study. And I think that made a difference for me, and Todd kind of touched on it a bit earlier, is that when the money stops, not that obviously I had the money that was life defining. It feels like I'm talking a lot about the money, but I'm okay about it.
He has been throwing the NBA river of money in your face this whole time.
Money's not important. It really isn't, Chris.
Say be honest and genuine, did we not?
No, I like it. Chris needs to be taken down a peg or two.
Yes.
He normally comes on the podcast and he's just talking about his NBL cash. But now he's gone down a peg and I'm loving it.
I've been found out a bit here.
There's plenty of NBA players that would look down on the amount of cash I made. Don't worry about that.
So
There's always somebody bigger.
Yeah, so I think I was always pleased that I took the time to study. I had some time at the AIS on scholarship there, and not a lot of the guys on the team were studying as well as playing there at the AIS, and I continued to study through the Perth Wildcat years, and I always kind of had a sense that I had a sort of a business DNA, and spent time in media and then health insurance and now in audiology. It's been probably evolutionary for me, so but I do think a lot of the things that I learned playing professional sports at that time, still come up today. The team ethos, the rewarding the inputs, less so the outputs, etc., etc. So I think I look back now and I'm very, very pleased with the smooth transition out of sports into professional life. But it took a little bit of planning.
So what are some of the things that you thought about when you were doing that planning?
It's a great question because at that planning I was in the mid-20s.
Yeah. All he knew was that he didn't like wine and he went from there. He's like, anything outside the wine industry is open slather.
Exactly.
Todd had cornered that, you mean?
I think interesting for me, it was you had to, when you were leaving a sports career and starting out on a sort of like a corporate life, you probably needed to reframe your thinking about what success is. And, I remember my first jobs were as junior as any job could be. And, having played sport to a semi-decent level and then having to sort of consolidate and step back a little bit and get on a new sort of stream. I know some guys find that tough and they don't really want to take steps backwards to ultimately go forward. So you've got to sort of swallow your pride a bit and sort of why shouldn't I start at the bottom, kind of, because it's where everyone starts. So I'm going to have to do that. And, from that, a lot of things I learned in sport I've just sort of carried with me and it's worked out all right so far.
How big a factor is ego in I guess to the question around, maybe
which one of us looks like we have the biggest?
I think
maybe that'll be the best one to answer that.
Size of contract and ego sort of move together, so it's probably top.
Because part of it is, being able to separate yourself, as you said earlier, Todd, from things that you have or what someone else has that you aspire to. So, Chris, obviously, the NBA salaries aside, you talked about just a minute ago being able to say, I'm going to do the job for the job's sake.
Yep.
So was that a difficult thing for you to do coming out of perhaps professional sport?
Yeah, with professional sports is such an artificial environment. And, you know, there's a lot of talk now about, are we doing enough for people that are currently in professional sports who very quickly fall out of it? Because the drop away currently for people who are doing professional and semi-professional, it's a big drop. And so they're now going a little bit upstream that says, okay, what can people start doing now? So the biggest transition is a mental transition. You know,
I think it's actually recognition, and you touched on it, that it is an artificial world, and it lasts for 5-10 years if you're lucky. If you recognize that early, you're ready to prepare for the rest of your life, and you can integrate. But it's a whole nother podcast, really. I could go on and on about this topic, because I think
we'll just go take over another segment of the Entertainment Cube, and we'll do the follow-up podcast.
Absolutely.
I think I mentioned earlier that I think professional sport can be a real trap.
Yeah.
And for some of the reasons you just touched on.
There aren't too many corporate people that end up with those types of salaries. Usually it's CEO level, Kate. So was that a big thing for you, leaving? I guess Goldman Sachs has a really great reputation, status as well. Sometimes it's not money, but it's status. So, you know, how big a reflection was that for you, or a learning around redefining success there?
As a corporate colossus.
I think I'd spent a lot of time prior to that at Goldman's defining who I was outside of Goldman's. But it doesn't happen. The organisations don't help you do that. So you become everything about those large organisations or even small organisations. It's actually moving outside that and doing things outside so you can build up your, not only skill base, but your definition of who you are. The only thread I was going to pick up, and I know you're going from elite sports into mainstream, I actually think there's a lot of a lot of similar issues around the transition of young people today.
That's right.
You know, all of this definition around what success looks like is on the social media. The idea that we have too many people being overeducated now, and then the ability to try and get a job and be resilient enough to get a job. It's exactly the same theme as you coming down, as people trying to come up. And so I think more than ever, there is this need to break down what success is. And in fact, maybe success is in fact the wrong word. And whether it is, I spend a lot of time helping young people transition into the workforce. And, you know, 50 interviews is a very straightforward, you know, it's like a very common story. The resilience and knowing of self that you have to be able to withstand that. Doesn't matter if you played MBA or if you're actually just graduating. So I think it calls for it a lot. And this idea around knowing your why and knowing your story, it just builds your resilience, which everyone actually needs to survive in the world that seems to be getting tougher.
Yeah.
It does. And the idea, I guess, from all of you, that your story can change over time depending where you are in career and life. And that's okay as well, because that's part of where we need to get to.
I think we need to do a bit of a wrap up. We're rapidly running out of time. Any final takeaways from this amazing panel?
Chris?
Love to hear them.
Oh, no, I think the word success is bandied around too much, and Kate, you touched on it, this redefinition, having it grounded in someone's purpose. And it's very difficult for someone, if we talk about someone in their early 20s, late teens, to understand their why. I don't think it's impossible, but it's very difficult. And I wonder whether people are being challenged at the right stage of their life to discover that why. And if they did, would their trajectory or resilience be different than what it otherwise might be? So,
a good thought to leave that on. Kate?
I think the reason to explore it is the importance of knowing what you're capable of rather than what you're comfortable in doing.
Okay, bit of personal challenge there and being up for it. Todd?
Look, I think in a nutshell, a successful day to me is when you go home, do you feel good about yourself? And that's a successful day. If you string 7 of those together, that's a successful week. In a year or so, I think you've got to feel good about what you do and what you've done during the day for that to be a successful day.
When I sit down at the end of a long day with a glass of Slam Dunk Shiraz, I always feel pretty good about myself.
You're not going to let that one go, are you?
It's $1 million idea.
I feel like asking you, what does success look like for you?
Look, all I've ever been chasing success-wise was to be in a small segment of the Entertainment Cube at Mkek, wearing my red Reebok pumps in front of some basketball superstars and a corporate colossus, with a bunch of people who may or may not be listening, looking at a huge slide of me looking tired and bemused. I think I've achieved that today, so I can reassess what success means to me now moving forward.
Well, I'm not really sure what to say after that, except I'm glad that we've helped you fulfill your vision of success. It's been a really great conversation. The whole idea of things change and we should just go with it, but invest the time and be okay with not, being perfect, and also move beyond the money, I think, because not everyone can achieve those superstar salaries, Todd. That was not a dig at you, Chris.
Thanks,
All
Alice.
right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining
Thanks,
us on another
everyone.
episode of The Leadership of Fools.
Thanks.